On Christmas morning, I received a devastating message. Don't come. We're done pretending you're part of this family. To us, you're dead. Even so, I took my 7-year-old son to see his grandparents. What followed was a public humiliation in front of my little boy, shouting, insults, mockery, threats, and even a baseball bat. They threw us out like garbage. My son was crying as I held his hand and promised him things would change. A week later, my phone exploded with dozens of desperate messages, missed calls, and voices begging for forgiveness. 2 days before Christmas, I received a text from my father that made me throw my phone against the wall. I'm not exaggerating. The message read, "Don't come this Christmas. We're done pretending you're part of this family. To us, you're dead." Who says that to their son right before the holidays? I know things had been tense with my family since Laura and I split up last year, but this was a whole new level. My parents always believed I wasn't living up to my potential or whatever, and they never accepted my relationship with her. When we had our son, Nico, they barely acknowledged him for years, but I wasn't going to let them erase me from their lives like that. Nico is 7 and was thrilled to see his grandparents for Christmas, even though they always treated him with complete disdain. I never told him what the message said. I thought about showing up anyway, believing they wouldn't make a scene in front of the neighbors they care so much about. So on Christmas morning, we drove 2 hours to their house. Nico had wrapped small gifts for everyone himself, using his own money, and he was overjoyed. On the way, he kept asking if his grandma would make the cookies he loves. I almost turned back at least 5 times, but I couldn't believe they'd reject their own grandson. Who does that? When we arrived, I saw my siblings' cars, my sister's BMW, my brother's Jeep. The whole family was inside. Nico with his little bag of gifts and I with what we'd brought approached the door. When my mother opened it, her face said it all. She said, "I told you not to come, get off my property." Then she saw Nico and her expression turned even more bitter. "And you brought him with you," she exclaimed. "How dare you?" Laughter echoed from inside the house. I tried to explain that Nico just wanted to see his family for Christmas. Then my brother appeared at the door and threw a half-full beer can at me, soaking my jacket. He shouted, "Security, we have an intruder, someone call 911, as if it were a joke. Nico grabbed my hand, trembling. Then my father came out with a baseball bat. Yes, a real bat. He started yelling that I'm 29, unemployed, a failure who can't pay child support, all lies. I lost my job in October and missed one payment, which I covered the next month. My mother, screaming, told Nico his father was a loser and that's why his mother left him. My uncle, my father's brother, joined in, laughing, saying I got a drug addict pregnant. A complete lie. Laura had some issues before Nico was born, but she's been clean for years. My mother took the gifts, threw them into the yard, stomped on them, and screamed for me to take that cheap store-bought trash away, saying Nico deserved a real father, not someone like me. Nico broke down crying when my father pointed at him and said he'd grow up to be a nobody like his dad. Neighbors came out onto their porches. Some started recording with their phones. It was the greatest humiliation I've ever experienced. My father's final words were, "Don't come back until you stop being a disgrace. Better yet, don't come back at all. You're no longer my son." I smiled, took Nico's hand, and said, "You're going to regret this." Then I left. In the car, Nico was sobbing, asking what he'd done wrong. I had to pull over because I couldn't see through my rage. I told him he'd done nothing wrong, that the problem was his grandparents. They were just bad people. The truth is, my family was always like this. Nothing I did was ever enough. My brother was the athlete, my sister the smart one, and I was just the leftover. When I didn't get into the colleges they wanted, they made me feel it. When I started dating Laura in my early 20s, they called her trash because she didn't come from a wealthy family like ours. They always looked down on me. After the divorce, things got worse. I moved to a smaller place, started over. Even though I see Nico every weekend and several weekdays, and I work hard to provide for him, they see me as a failure for not earning as much as my siblings. A week later, around 11 p.m., my phone blew up with calls and messages. Over 60 missed calls, 45 texts, several voice messages full of crying and yelling. Now, apparently, they needed something from me, something only I could provide, and they were desperate. I didn't answer a single one. I listened to one message where my father sounded genuinely scared. Good. Let them suffer. Let them stew in their anxiety. I've been saving screenshots, recording voicemails, making a plan. If they want to treat my son and me like trash, if they want to humiliate me in front of the whole neighborhood, then they can face the consequences. Update: 3 weeks have passed since the Christmas disaster where my family publicly humiliated my son and me. Many asked for an update, and boy, do I have one. After ignoring their calls for days, I decided to listen to some messages. My father went from, "Call me Ivan, please, we need to talk," to literally begging. My mother's messages followed the same pattern, with an extra touch of emotional blackmail about how I was destroying the family. I had no intention of responding, but then I got a message from my cousin Julian. We were never close, but he's always been the only decent one in the clan. He asked to meet for lunch, saying there was something I needed to know. I hesitated but trusted he wouldn't set me up. We met at a cafe near my apartment. The first thing he did was slide an envelope across the table. Inside was a copy of my grandfather's will. I asked what it had to do with anything, and he told me to read page 4, paragraph 2. Turns out my grandfather, my father's father, who passed away 5 years ago, left a very specific clause. The lake house where we spent summers is in a trust, and to sell it, all grandchildren must sign an authorization upon turning 30. I turn 30 next month. The point is, my parents are trying to sell that property. They already have a buyer offering well above market value, but they want to demolish it to build a vacation resort. Millions are at stake, but they need my signature, and soon. The buyer's deadline is February 15. Without all the signatures, they lose the deal. Julian showed me emails between my father and the real estate agent. The buyer is ready, but without me, there's no deal. After he left, I stayed in the cafe for an hour, processing everything. Years of disdain, insults, humiliations, and now they need me. I'm the key to their treasure. I went to Laura's to pick up Nico for our weekend. While he packed his things, Laura saw how stressed I was and asked what was wrong. I told her everything. She was angrier than I'd ever seen her, even during our worst fights. She suggested I talk to her brother, Sebastian, a real estate lawyer. I hesitated at first. My relationship with her family hasn't been great since the separation, but she insisted. So Monday morning, I called him. Turns out my position is even stronger than I thought. Not only can I refuse the sale, but the trust stipulates that all beneficiaries must have access to the property. My parents have been changing locks and security codes for years to keep me out of the family lake house. That move, besides being cruel, directly violates the trust's terms. When I finally got proof of this, I called my father. His voice, when he answered, was almost comically relieved. He acted cheerful, as if Christmas never happened. I let him talk for barely 30 seconds before interrupting. I told him I knew about the lake house sale. There was a tense silence Chinese letter. Then his tone changed completely. He tried to justify it, saying it was a family decision and the money would be used for everyone's benefit, including a supposed college fund for the grandchildren. I asked if that included Nico or if he still considered my son a bastard, a term he'd used in Russian when he lost control. He didn't answer right away. Then, without beating around the bush, he tried to bribe me, offering $50,000 in cash to sign the papers. When I didn't react, he raised it to $75,000. I laughed, told him I'd think about it, and hung up. Minutes later, my siblings started texting. My sister accused me of being selfish. My brother sent a long text about family loyalty, ironic, coming from the guy who threw a beer can at me in front of my son. The next day, I got a group message from my mother to the extended family, saying they'd host a special dinner that Saturday to heal wounds. How convenient that they care about reconciliation now that they need my signature. I decided to go, but not to reconcile. I wanted them to look me in the eye. On Saturday, I arrived at my parents' house alone. My mother immediately asked about Nico, feigning grandmotherly concern. I said he was at a friend's birthday party, which was true, but there was no way I'd bring him there after what happened. The whole family was there, parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, all pretending everything was normal as if Christmas hadn't happened. It was eerie. My father stood up to give a speech about the value of family, forgiveness, and a shared future. Then my mother brought out a folder with the lake house sale documents and started talking about what a great opportunity it was for everyone. That's when I stood up, pulled out my phone, and played recordings of their Christmas insults. The entire table went silent. Then I passed out copies of my grandfather's will, with the sections about equal access to the property highlighted. I asked why I'd been excluded for years. My father could barely stammer, while my uncle tried to say it was water under the bridge. I reminded him that just 3 weeks ago, he called my ex a drug addict in front of my 7-year-old son. Then I laid out my conditions, a written apology to me and Nico, my rightful share of the sale as per the will, an additional percentage for the years I was denied access to the house, and a college fund for Nico equal to those of my siblings' kids. My brother stood up, furious, knocking over his chair, and called me an extortionist. My father told him to shut up. That's when I knew they were backed into a corner. I left without signing anything, telling them to contact me when they were ready to meet my terms. As I walked out, my mother grabbed my arm, digging her nails in, begging me not to destroy the family. I pulled away and told her they were the ones who destroyed everything, on Christmas, not me. 4 days later, the calls and messages haven't stopped. Even my father's business partner reached out, trying to persuade me. Apparently, they'd already spent money anticipating the sale. My sister's husband cornered me at the grocery store yesterday, telling me to be reasonable. I've blocked almost everyone, but I keep my parents' voicemails. Each one is more desperate than the last. Yesterday, my father finally admitted they're in financial trouble and need this sale. Apparently, their perfect life wasn't so perfect, And now, the disappointing son they need is the one bailing them out. The clock is ticking, they're panicking, and honestly, it feels pretty good. This is just the beginning. Update: things have escalated since my last post about the lake house. Thanks for all the comments and support, it's really helped me stay strong. After that family dinner where I laid out my terms, my parents wouldn't stop calling and texting, each message more desperate than the last. I ignored most of them but kept the voicemails as evidence. One night around 2 a.m., my sister sent a strange text. "Ivan, please sign the papers. Dad isn't sleeping. Mom's on anxiety meds." Don't you get what's at stake? That piqued my curiosity. What else was at stake besides losing a sale? I remembered my cousin Julian, who showed me the will, and asked if he knew more about my parents' finances. He hesitated but eventually told me my father's business has been struggling for a couple of years. During the pandemic, he took out big loans he can't cover, but that didn't fully explain their desperation. There had to be more, so I contacted my maternal grandmother, with whom I've always had an honest relationship. We met for coffee and she dropped a bombshell. My parents had mortgaged their house twice in the last 3 years and borrowed money from several relatives, including her, promising a big deal would soon close. That deal was clearly the lake house sale. And then she mentioned something else, a college fund my parents supposedly set up for Nico when he was born. This was news to me. I called Laura to ask if she knew anything. She was as shocked as I was. So I contacted my parents' financial advisor, the same one they made me meet in college to discuss student loans. I didn't expect much, but he assumed I already knew and casually mentioned a trust fund in Nico's name. Playing dumb, I asked for details. He told me my grandfather had set up educational trusts for all his great-grandchildren before he died. Nico's fund had over $40,000, money I never knew existed, money meant for my son. I was furious. While I worked 2 jobs to support us, and they never stopped reminding me of the one time I missed a child support payment, they were hiding money meant for Nico, calling me an irresponsible father. I decided to hit back hard. First, I had Sebastian, Laura's brother, draft a formal letter demanding immediate information about Nico's trust fund, threatening legal action if they didn't respond within 48 hours. Then I went to my parents' country club, where their reputation matters most. It was Sunday brunch, and their usual table was full, along with 2 other couples. My father's face when he saw me was pure confusion. He stood up as if to escort me out before I could say anything. I smiled, placed 2 documents on the table, a copy of the Christmas text where he said I was dead to them, and a legal letter about Nico's hidden trust fund. Loud enough for the table to hear, I said I was still waiting for their response on the lake house sale terms, and that we needed to discuss the money they'd hidden from my son. One of the women gasped audibly. My mother looked like she was about to collapse. My father grabbed my arm, trying to pull me aside, but I shook him off and warned him not to touch me. He hissed that we needed to talk privately. I told him there was nothing to discuss until they admitted everything: the lake house, Nico's fund, and any other financial secrets. The club manager approached, clearly considering whether to kick me out. My father quickly assured him it was a family matter. His face was pure panic, more worried about his image than the situation itself. I left without causing more of a scene, but the damage was done. My phone started blowing up with messages from my parents and siblings. That night, my brother showed up at my apartment, banging on the door and yelling that I was destroying the family. I didn't open it, recorded everything from inside, and called building security. The next morning, my father emailed me documents about Nico's trust, suddenly willing to transfer full control. How convenient, but they didn't mention my other demands about the lake house. They clearly wanted to separate the issues, thinking I'd drop one if they gave in on the other. I didn't respond. Instead, I contacted the real estate agent handling the lake house sale. Introducing myself as a legal owner, I requested all documentation on the deal. She hesitated until I mentioned potential legal issues for not notifying all owners. Hours later, I had the full contract in my inbox. That's when I realized how big this was: not a vacation home buyer, but a development company planning a luxury resort. The sale price was nearly triple what my parents led me to believe. No wonder they were desperate. I sent everything to Sebastian, who confirmed my suspicions. My parents planned to give me a tiny fraction of what I was legally owed. I sent my father one text: I know about the development company. I know the real price. The clock's ticking until February 15. He called immediately. I didn't answer. Then came a mix of threatening and pleading messages. The best was, "You'll regret this when you need our help." Ironic, coming from someone who now depends on me. Yesterday, my mother showed up at my workplace, sobbing uncontrollably. She caused such a scene that my boss had to ask her to leave. She said they could lose their house, that my father's business partners were threatening lawsuits, that my nephews would lose their college funds if this fell apart. I looked her in the eye and said, "You should have thought of that before telling Nico his father was worthless, before throwing our Christmas gifts on the ground, before treating me like garbage for years." She tried to grab my arm, but I pulled away. She claimed they were upset that day and didn't mean what they said. I laughed. It wasn't one bad day. It was years of looking down on me, questioning my choices, belittling my son. When she realized I wouldn't budge, her tone changed. She called me selfish, always a problem, and said that's why Laura left me. I just smiled and walked away. Today, my uncle, my father's brother, who once called Laura a drug addict in front of Nico, tried to play mediator. He said we'd all said things we regretted and it was time to move on. I asked if he regretted calling Nico's mother a drug addict in front of him. He mumbled something about being drunk. I hung up. 10 days remain until the deadline. My parents are increasingly desperate. They've agreed to all my initial conditions, but I'm not sure that's enough anymore. This was never just about money. It's about years of being made to feel like the family disappointment, about them humiliating my son, hiding his money. Tomorrow I'm meeting with the development company. My parents don't know. I'm not sure what I'll decide, but one thing's clear. I'm done. They're about to learn that the son they despised holds all the cards now, and I'm not playing nice anymore. Final update, this week has been absolute madness, and I've barely had time to process it all. First, thank you for the support on my previous posts. It's helped me stay grounded in this chaos. Remember the meeting I scheduled with the development company without telling my parents? That meeting changed everything. I arrived at their downtown office feeling out of place among all the suits while I was dressed casually. The receptionist gave me a strange look until I gave my name, and her attitude shifted immediately. They took me to a conference room where 3 executives were waiting. The main one, a slim man, asked if I was representing my family. I said no, I was there on my own and they didn't know I was coming. The room grew tense. He asked what I wanted. I told them everything. How my family treated me on Christmas, how they hid Nico's trust fund, how they tried to cheat me on the lake house deal. I showed them recordings from that night and threatening messages from my siblings. Far from being uncomfortable, the slim man seemed intrigued. He said they'd only negotiated with my father and were unaware of the family conflicts. Then he asked if I was there to block the sale. That's when I dropped the bombshell. I wasn't opposed to the sale itself, but I wanted to negotiate directly with them. The slim man explained that the land was perfect for their project, but they needed all signatures by the deadline or they'd move to another location. He asked what I needed to sign. I didn't ask for more money. I made 3 requests: that my share of the payment be delivered directly to me, that a small memorial space be included in honor of my grandfather, the original owner, and that the resort be renamed from G Resort to Abnico Resort after my son. The slim man went silent for a moment, then burst out laughing. In his 20 years in real estate, he said, he'd never seen someone ask for naming rights instead of more money. His tone was one of respect. After several rounds of negotiation, we reached an agreement. They'd meet all my demands and give me a small stake in the final development. The slim man had new documents drafted, and I signed a preliminary agreement before leaving. As I walked out, he shook my hand and said with a half smile, "Your family really underestimated you, didn't they?" That felt strangely validating. On my drive home, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Somehow my father had found out about the meeting, probably through someone at the company. His messages went from confusion to panic to rage. The best part, I didn't respond to any of them. The next morning, I got an official email from the company confirming the agreement and informing me they'd notified my parents of the changes. An hour later, my father showed up at my apartment, pounding on the door. I opened it, but didn't let him in. He tried to force his way inside, but I blocked him and told him firmly he wasn't welcome. His face was red, trembling with rage, yelling that I had no right to go behind their backs, that I was stealing from the family, that I'd always been selfish. I just laughed and asked if he was done. That made him angrier. He shouted that they'd raised me, paid for my education. I reminded him I'd funded it all with student loans. Plus, just 2 months ago, he said I wasn't his son anymore. He couldn't have it both ways. Then he switched tactics, claiming my mother was so stressed she might need to be hospitalized. I asked if she was as upset as she was when she called Nico a bastard on Christmas. He went quiet for a few seconds. Then came the threat. They'd sue, contest the deal, tell everyone how ungrateful I was. I pulled out my phone and reminded him I had recordings of everything. Did he really want a judge to hear how they treated their grandson? As a last resort, he offered to split his share if I canceled the deal. Too late. Before he left, he got close and said something that, while painful, clarified a lot. You've always been like your mother's brother, stubborn, troublesome, thinking you're better than everyone else. Then he walked away, leaving a heavy silence. My mother's brother took his own life when I was young. He was rarely mentioned, though I'd heard whispers of depression and addiction. It hit me that my father had been comparing me to him my whole life. His constant distrust, emotional distance, and different treatment of me compared to my siblings all made sense. They saw me as a ticking time bomb, destined to implode like my uncle. That realization didn't make me forgive them, but it helped me understand their twisted logic. The next day, my mother sent a group message announcing a mandatory family meeting that night, including extended family. I almost ignored it but decided to go one last time. I arrived deliberately late. The room was packed, my parents, siblings and their spouses, my grandmother, aunts, uncles, cousins, including Julian. The air grew tense the moment I walked in. My father began with a speech about family unity and how acting alone in business was a betrayal of the family core. Some nodded. Then my mother, in tears, said this situation was tearing the family apart, that they'd always wanted the best for me, but I'd made harmful choices for everyone. Pure manipulation. My sister chimed in, saying her kids depended on the sale for their education. My brother mentioned the vacation home he planned to buy with his share. I listened in silence. Finally, my father asked for my side. I stood up, connected my phone to the TV, and played the Christmas video. The insults, the beer can, the bat, the humiliation of Nico in front of the neighbors. The room went dead silent. Then I showed voicemails and screenshots, not the desperate ones, but the manipulative and threatening ones. I also presented documents about Nico's trust fund, which they'd hidden for years. When I finished, several relatives looked at my parents in disbelief. My grandmother was openly crying. Even my siblings looked uncomfortable. I clarified that I wasn't blocking the sale, it was going forward. I explained the terms, including the memorial for my grandfather and the resort named after Nico. I emphasized that everyone would get their share. I hadn't taken anyone's money. Looking at my parents, I made it clear this wasn't about money, but about them facing the consequences of their actions, understanding they couldn't discard people and then ask for favors. My father tried to interrupt, but my grandmother told him to be quiet, something I'd never seen before. I closed with two announcements. First, I'd take full control of Nico's trust fund, and all matters related to him would go through me alone. Second, I'd use part of my share to start a foundation in my uncle's name, focused on youth mental health. That made my mother gasp and collapse into a chair. I left without waiting for a response. As I walked out, Julian and a few cousins caught up with me. They said they didn't know how bad things were or what happened on Christmas. Julian even apologized for not supporting me sooner. The sale closed 3 days ago. The money was deposited directly into my account. The developers sent Nico a model of the resort with his name on it. He was thrilled. Since the meeting, my parents have been eerily silent. My siblings have sent cautious messages, trying to reconnect now that they've got their money. Too late. Laura and I took Nico to an amusement park to celebrate. It was the first time in months I saw him laugh without that constant worry on his face. That night he asked if we could visit his grandparents soon. I explained that probably wouldn't happen for a long time, maybe never. He thought for a moment and said, "That's okay. They weren't very nice anyway. Sometimes kids understand more than we think." The paperwork for the foundation is in progress. Some of my mother's relatives have reached out to help. Many remember my uncle, but no one talked about him because my parents erased him from the family story. I learned from Julian that they're selling their house, the one they mortgaged twice. They're downsizing and canceled their country club membership. Actions have consequences. I don't know if I'll ever speak to them again. I still feel some anger, but mostly I feel free from seeking their approval, from being the family problem. Construction on the resort begins next month. Nico and I will be at the groundbreaking ceremony. My parents haven't been invited. Sometimes the best revenge isn't a complex scheme. It's taking control, setting boundaries, and letting others face the consequences of their actions. That Christmas message saying I was dead to them was, ironically, the best gift they ever gave me. It showed me who they really were and gave me the push I needed to stop letting them define me.